Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining me today. It's our Wednesday afternoon webinars. It's well, we've done quite a few so far this year. But yeah, every 6 weeks we try and schedule these in to try and add value to you guys and keep you progressing along your digital transformation and using technology in the workplace. So yeah, thanks for joining today. And this topic we're talking about tasks. So task management. In particular, within Office 365 or Microsoft 365, there are several tools. So I'll do a bit of show and tell through those and talk about the bits that I kind of like about them and the bits that I don't like about them. So a bit of a unbiased overview of them. So bit of housekeeping before we start. You are all currently muted, but we have a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to come off mute at the end or chuck your questions into the Q&A across the top bar. There should be a little Q&A button, so feel free to jump in there and ask some questions. We have Anna Marika on the call supporting me as well, so she'll be able to answer some questions as they come up. So yeah, feel free to use that function. And I do just have to warn you that we are recording this session. We've had lots of people register for this. I can see the names keep popping up. We've had lots of people register. There's been a lot of interest, but I do realize that a lot of people wait for the recordings to come through. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see so many names on the board here today. So, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I think if we're all good to go, Anna Marika, shall I get started?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, awesome. All right, so tasks in M365. So what tools are available and which to use when? In what scenario does each task make sense? Okay, so I've just taken a look at, from my perspective, so what do I think about when I think about task management? So I have to track my tasks. So these are the tasks that I have as priority. So I've got to keep track of what I need to be working on and when I need to be working on them. So that gives me accountability of my own task list and managing my activities throughout the days. I also need to prioritize them. So I need to work on what I need to focus on next. So out of my 101 tasks, what is the one that I need to do next? So that's really important for me. But then I also need to plan out my entire day and my entire week or the rest of the month because we have like multiple projects going on. So I got to slip my tasks in and fit them into those gaps that I have. So to have visibility over that kind of timeline as well is really important. But also because we're all about business processes, we come from that power platform space of building that automation and having defined business processes, especially that helps you scale as a business and it helps you have every staff member within the organization follows exactly the same process. So that's what the kind of thing I think about when I think about task management as well, to build repeatable and standardized workflows. Then the other big part of it is okay, so I can look at my tasks, but I also have to think about other people's tasks. So when you have like leadership or you're working within a team, then you need to start tracking what other people are doing as well. So I need to be able to delegate tasks to other people, making them accountable, but I need to monitor and follow up on their progress, which means that I'm still responsible for the task, even though I've delegated it. So there is this level where I need to have visibility over other people's tasks, and I need to assign them tasks, and I need to track their progress on them. But I also need to know when potentially those teams are at capacity or stretched a little bit too thin, so they have too many tasks that they're not getting through their workload. So that helps us with that kind of like review cycle of just making sure that they're on top of their task, but they're not overloaded. And that's a good indicator that we could look at expanding the team. So and again, we have the repeatable and standardized workflows. If I can make sure that every team member follows the same process when they're delivering solutions or implementing um, you know, whatever actions we're working through in those tasks, then that helps us scale the business. So those are the things that I'm worried about, and I'd imagine that that's pretty similar to most other people. In particular, like the my task versus other people's tasks. So how do you give visibility and oversight? So with that in mind, let's talk about what most people do for task management. If you don't have a task management tool or a system, then what I see that most people do is they manage their email inbox as their task list. Now, the downside to that is now we have also introduced Teams. So you also have to manage your email inbox for a task list and you have to manage your Teams messages as a task list. And that gets really confusing. The other thing is you just shout across the room like, "Hey, Anamrika, can you do this for me?" And so technically that's delegating a task, but there is zero tracking on her progress or whether I have assigned it and what the task that I did previously to giving it to Anamrika and things like that. So that's not a great use case, but that's what people do. You also have meeting notes and minutes of meetings, which essentially the outcome of all of your meetings would or should be to have actionable task lists. So that's another place where we generate tasks and we have to manage them somewhere as well. There could be post-it notes or handwritten notes, or like I know my wife loves doing task lists. She loves writing them and then crossing them out. She finds it quite rewarding going through that process. Um, so that is another option. Then you've got other apps. So you might look at third-party apps. Like even your phone these days holds task lists. Like you can talk to your phone and ask it to keep track of tasks and things like that. So there's a whole variety of places where we can get tasks, but it's really hard to manage them and really hard to have visibility and oversight across all the tasks from all the places and keeping track of things that way. So what's the uh, we'll talk about what the solution is, but actually, let's look at this. So, email inbox and Teams messages seems to be the primary place where people seem to manage tasks. So, a couple of points on that is that those are actually communication tools. They're not intended to be task management. They are task generative tools. So, people will email you with tasks, like clients will email you, and that is a task then to have to respond to. But generally, they kind of lack task organization, so like priorities. I know people create priorities in their inbox, like maybe they work from the oldest to the newest, or they work from the ones that have capitalized letters because someone's getting angry. There's different ways that you can create organization, but it's not actually a structured task management tool. There's also high volume. So, if you get hundreds of emails a day, the task that you need to be working on next gets dropped further and further down the list, and you have to clean up your emails before you can find those tasks again. So that's things easily missed and forgotten. There's no prioritization, so what is the next thing you're going to be working on? You kind of have to read all your emails. I see people create folders and they start putting emails into folders, and that's the next thing they're going to work on, and these are other things they have to work on and stuff like that. But it's all kind of trying to create a system that is not really designed to be there. So we'll talk about how we can convert from a email message or a Teams message into tasks. So we'll talk about that later. The other thing is you may have five emails in a chain or a chat inside of Teams. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have five tasks because everyone's contributing towards it. And, you may only have one task. So you may look at your email and go, oh my gosh, I have 57 emails to work through. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have 57 things that you have to action. Some of them are just read and kind of clean them up. And once you're in that communication space, you just have to be conscious that it's a high distraction space because you may be working on a task because that's the space you're managing your tasks in, and you're getting pinged new messages and new things are coming in, and it's an easy distraction. So I know they say for like true task management, you should actually shut down your email and focus on the task that you have in hand, and schedule your email reviewing time to particular times throughout the day. So yeah, close off those distractions and actually focus on the task in hand. And therefore, you need to take the tasks out of those communication tools and work in a task management space. So altogether, fairly inefficient way of managing tasks. So we'll talk about better ways of doing things. Okay, so what tools can help me? So like I said, Microsoft has a variety of tools, so it's just picking the right one for the right scenario. You may have already heard of the tools, but I'm just going to lay a bit of framework around why you would make a decision on one tool versus the other. So you may have seen these slides before, but this is a common conversation that we have with people. But if you think about the modern workplace infrastructure inside of the Microsoft environments, so you have your company and you have departments and teams, and then you have individual people within your organization. So there is already this hierarchy inside of Microsoft 365. Typically, and there's a lot of exceptions to this rule, but the basic principles are SharePoint is where you hold companies' resources, companies' information. If you have teams and departments, then the kind of clue is in the name. You have teams for managing teams and groups. And then for individual people, you have OneDrive. So that's your personal workspace. And how we often define that is, so you've got resources at the company level, you have the productivity workspaces at a team's level or a department level, and then you have personal productivity in that OneDrive space. So this is how quite often Microsoft will always structure some of their things. So some of their services. So document management, for example, you could put a document in SharePoint as a company resource. You could put a document in Teams. That's your productivity space. That's your working team. You could put a document in your OneDrive. That's your personal document. So that's the document that you are currently working on. Now, any of you that have gone through our discovery workshop, then you'll know that we always highlight the risks around the personal productivity space because that is owned by that individual person. And if they were to leave the organization and their account gets, shut down, then so does all of the content that's tied to that individual. So that's one thing you just have to be aware of, which is why we always recommend you try and promote it at least to that departmental level. So, because with a team of people, the actual people, the individual people can come and go in and out of that organization, but the core structure stays within the team. So that's kind of always our focus of kind of elevating things out of personal productivity and making them more that teams and department level productivity. So with that in mind, how does that align with task management? So we don't really think about tasks in that company-wide space. So because that's not a resource, we're talking about tasks being a productivity workspace. And therefore, the obvious thing would be at that departmental team level, which the tool in that space is called Planner. So Microsoft Planner is built into Office 365. Inside of each team, you can have the ability to create a planner plan. And in fact, you can actually create multiple planner plans and have different workflows happening for different scenarios. So we'll delve into that one, but just bear in mind as we go through this. So Planner is at that teams and department level of task management, whereas at the individual level, you have a product called ToDo. So very similar to Teams for communications and OneDrive, or Teams for your document storage and OneDrive for your personal document storage. So this is Planner for your Teams task management and ToDo for your personal task management. Now, as always, Microsoft likes to really blur the lines across this structure. Likewise, you could put a document into your OneDrive and you can share it to a bunch of people. You could share a OneDrive document to your whole team. You can share it to your whole organization. So that kind of breaks that logic. But we recommend that a best practice is you actually keep the document in the structure of where it's intended to live and not break it out from your OneDrive. So an example for document management in OneDrive would be like specifically my document, that if I leave the organization, then the document can leave with me and it actually doesn't matter whether it gets shared. So take like payslips, for example, is a great example. So I could keep my payslips in my personal OneDrive, and therefore if I leave, the payslips kind of go with me. I don't need to share those across the whole organization. If I was going to share a document, I would put it into Teams or I'd put it into SharePoint and then share it from there because it's automatically shared to the permissions of whoever has access to the team or SharePoint. So that's the logic behind that. So similarly to task management under ToDo, I can create a task and I could create a group of tasks and I could share them to a team. I kind of recommend that you try and avoid doing that. If you're going to have teams shared tasks, then you should probably consider Planner as the solution to that because that is in that team's productivity workspace. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. But we are going to step in and go through both of those solutions. Right, so ToDo is your personal task list. So the way you find this is either through the apps menu inside of Office 365. So you can see it here. You've got ToDo on the apps bar. It is also embedded into Outlook. So you'll find that ToDo check mark inside of your Outlook. It is on a website called todo.office.com. You can install a Windows app as well. So if you go to the Microsoft App Store, or you might have to speak to IT about getting the Windows app installed, then you can do that on your desktop as well. And there's a mobile app too. So you can actually bring ToDo up on your phone and track your tasks that way. So lots of places, but they all point to the same solution. So if you put a task in any of those areas, you're going to have a consolidated task list. It's the same space. So this is what ToDo looks like. So there's things in here that if you've ever used any other task management system, then it's going to be pretty familiar. Like, for example, if we look here, so on my day, So these are the things that I have scheduled for today. So these are the things I have to work on today and get them actioned and closed. So if I don't complete items today, then they'll roll over to tomorrow and they just kind of go overdue and I can bring them into my day again. So that kind of keeps me on top of when, I talked about in my task, I have to manage my days. So that's the important thing for me. Then you also have the wider schedule. So what do I need to work on this week or this month? As soon as I start putting dates against my tasks, then they appear in the planned calendar. So that's giving me a calendar view of all of my tasks. There is also the ability to prioritize them, so I can mark things as important. So there's these little star indicators here, so you can star or you can star on the individual task. And essentially, that's a way of saying, well, I might have 10 tasks to do today. Two of them are really important. So I would, tag those with the star to make them my important tasks. And those are the first ones I'm going to work on today. So, yeah, there's different ways of kind of breaking that down and organizing it. There is also you could start looking at deadlines, so making sure that I know if I have to have something done by the end of the month, that I'm looking at my plan, my calendar to see what I've got coming up and making sure that I allocate enough time to complete that task before the deadline. And this is where we can start to group tasks as well. So you might build some categories in here for like management, solution development, and marketing, whatever fits your roles. I know people do a lot of personal stuff in there as well. So I've seen people do like shopping lists and uh, holiday planning and all these other things like clothes I need to pack and stuff like that. So you can create these little kind of groups. So to do that, so you have this ability to create new task lists, and then you can start adding tasks under those task lists. Then one thing I quite like is this ability to create checklists and subtasks of a parent task. So you can come in here and start adding steps. Now, what I like about this is then I'm actually structuring, the way that we start performing certain things within the organization. So I can create a task. Every time I do the same task, on a recurring basis, or every time I don't know, a client has a particular need, then I can actually say, well, this is what I'm doing. And I do that by doing one, two, three, four, five steps. And then I can start actually closing those off as little subtasks. And so that's really handy. Although I will warn you, one small negative is you can't repeat the tasks to say like every time I do a project, I want to create a blueprint or a template of that task and then replicate it. So you have to duplicate the task to create that replication, or you can turn on repeating if you want it to repeat on a cycle. So there are things you can do to replicate tasks, but there's no such thing as like create me a task based on this blueprint um, they're built into the system. So yeah, that's one slight thing I would like to see in there. But you can see from here, you can add files. So if the task list involves like working on documents, then you can add those files in here. Then you can work on those documents. You can add notes to remind you of things, as there's a wider text. You can also add categories. So if you want to start tagging particular tasks with different categories, so you might have tasks that you have to go visit a client, and you might have tasks that you could do remotely, and you can have tasks that like personal tasks. So those categories are slightly different to the ones when you're creating a separate list, but there's different ways you can kind of chop it up and manage those tasks. And then just a note across the top here, you've got this grid view and list view. There's not a huge actually there's not a huge difference between those two views. Unlike Planner, when we get to it, there's a difference between those two views. But yeah, it's a simple task management. It does what it needs to do, and the ability for you to create tasks, manage the deadlines, and actually make sure that they're closed off to those deadlines and in time. So yeah, just I recommend giving it a try. You'll probably come up with some good use cases and some limitations. Just bear in mind that to do, again, that's your personal task list. So it's not something you want to create as a company or a department-wide resource, because if you leave the organization, so does the task list. So just bear in mind that's your personal workspace. Okay, so just a quick note on how to shift from your inbox into to-do. So this is the common question. So, okay, well, I've received an email that I have to do something. How do I create a task? Or someone's pinged me in Teams asking me to do something. How do I create that task? So it's quite simple, actually. So inside of Outlook, you can just flag your tasks. As soon as you flag a task, then it comes through into your to-do items. So now you have a flagged task to work on. It actually takes the subject line of the email and creates a task, and then in the notes section, it has the body of the email as well. So that's a really cool feature that you can just very quickly create a task from here, and you can complete it from either Outlook or To-Do. So if you complete it here, then it marks it as complete inside of Outlook, or you can unflag it and it will mark it as complete in both systems anyway. So that's a really cool function to get your to-do items generated from emails. The other thing is converting a chat message from Teams. So, of course, internally now we're getting a lot of messages in Teams. Can you do this? Can you do that? So, what you have to do there is click on the three dots and then click Create Task, and then it will create a task for you in your to-do list. Um, in fact, that actually has a little bit more value, which we're going to talk about later. But inside of Teams, you can actually also create a task in Planner as well. So, we'll cover that one off shortly. But yeah, super simple. That's how you create tasks, or you just go to do and create the tasks. So you can create them on the fly as well inside the app. All right. So Planner. So Planner, as we already covered, this is your team's task list, which is why, generally speaking, you would create plans from Teams. So you have a department and you're going to create a plan, and that's a shared task list for all of the departments to work towards. So to find it, if you're going to go straight to Planner, then you would find it via, again, the app list in Office 365. Click on Planner, then that will launch kind of all of your plans across all of your teams. So if you're involved in multiple teams and they have multiple plans, that's where you're going to go to find all of your plans. There is also generally, if you've created a planner in the team, then you may have it in the tab across the team. So if you're particularly working in that space, so you have a projects workspace, there could be a planner as a tab across the top. That's where you go to manage the tasks that are specifically relevant to that project that you're working on. So the website for that is tasks.office.com. So a little bit different to todo.office.com, but yeah, tasks.office.com. And there is also a mobile app for Planner as well. Right, so once you are in Planner, so you have here a little hub where you can see all the tasks that are assigned to me, and you can see all of the plans. So just you got to be careful of the wording. So a planner is the app, and a plan is the plan within Planner. And then to do is something else. That's your personal productivity app. So planner and plans. It gets a little bit confusing, but yeah, the plan is the object within Planner. So you can create plans in Teams, and therefore, when you're in Planner, you can see all of the plans that you have access to. In this Debo tenant, I have access to two plans. So our project plan and our HR plan, so for employee onboarding. So in here, I can drill in and then access the tasks that are related to both of those plans. But I could have accessed it through the Teams directly as well. So that's how you access Planner. So one thing I quite like about Planner is the different views. So where to do is a little bit limited, Planner gives you a lot more flexibility on those views. So you can see here, so this grid view, so you look at the tabs across the top. In this grid view, a little bit similar to the to-do task list, but you can actually see you basically have columns. The difference being is I can assign different people in here. So this is where the teamwork comes in. So I can assign different resources to different tasks. They get notified when I assign them, and then they can action those tasks. There is also the schedule view. So across the entire team, you get this calendar view, and you can mark all the deadlines where the tasks are due. Now, I didn't capture an example, but we got start date and due dates. If you had, let's say, a 3-day task, so it started on a Wednesday and finished on a Friday, then the task would actually span the entire calendar width for those 3 days. And that way I can start looking at visibility over, well, how many tasks do you actually have to achieve in that period? So, we could use it for project management for clients' projects, and we could say, well, we only have enough resource to do X amount of projects. So once I see more than so many rows in that time period, then we start to delve in and question how, our levels of resources. There is also this charts view, which I will be honest, I have never actually used myself. I don't think it's super productive, but it gives you a nice little visual layout of whether the tasks, whether they're in progress, or the buckets that are assigned to. We're going to talk about buckets shortly, and what their priorities are, so you kind of get a bit of a gauge. I suppose if I had 100 tasks in there, then that probably becomes a bit more useful. But yeah, not my favorite view. But my favorite view is the next one, which is the board view. So one of the things I love about Planner versus To Do is the ability to create these buckets. So this is where you actually start building and mapping out your business process. So a task progresses through a certain sequence of phases, and therefore that's what the buckets are that you create here. So in this example, very simple example, but you have to do things, then you have things that are in progress, and you have things for sign off. So just think about those buckets and what those use cases are, particularly for yourselves, your teams, and across your organization. One thing I do see that's a little bit, I guess it's a bit of a waste of the function of buckets because you only have one way to create buckets. So you have to agree as a team how those buckets are going to be created. To me, it's logical that they should be phases. So the task progresses through a phase. But actually, I see people that create buckets for people. But you don't need a bucket for people because you can just assign the people, and that's how you handle assigning and having a view of who has access to what tasks. So you don't really need buckets for people. You just need buckets for progress. So here you can go in and create buckets. You can drag these tasks across each of those phases or each of the buckets, and that automatically changes the categorization of them through there. And then you can look at who's assigned and you can apply filters. So you can say, well, I can look at Anna Marika's assigned tasks, what she's overdue, what she's got planned for the future and stuff like that. So we could build some quite cool views there. Right. So one of the biggest problems is that visibility over everything. So, there may be 20 plans across the organization. How do I actually see all the tasks across all the plans? Now, the key to that is using this planner app inside of Teams. It's the only workspace really that you can get an overview of all of my tasks that I've been assigned across all of my plans and my to-do. So it's really important to use that, but it is only available through Teams. So you have to use the Planner app in Teams, which gives you visibility over tasks, including flagged emails and private tasks from your to-do. So I recommend if you're going to use these two tools, then make sure that you use the Planner app inside of Teams. Okay, so quickly, limitations. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try and run through this one quickly. And I don't want this to appear negative. They are really good tools. They are simple to use, basic task management tools. But these are some of the things that I've identified as problem areas. So I've already talked about visibility across everything is a problem. So the Planner app inside of Teams gives me visibility over my tasks, but it's really difficult for me to see visibility of somebody else's tasks. So if I'm looking at a team member's tasks across all of the plans, that's a little bit more challenging. You can work around it though by when you're doing a review with them that they drive it, they share their screen and you look at their tasks and stuff like that. But yeah, a little bit frustrating there. Security control as well. Everybody has edit access to all of the tasks in the planner. We have had some clients ask whether we can change that, and you can't. So basically, people have the rights to edit, delete, change, or do whatever they want to any of the tasks in Planner. So there is a bit of a vulnerability there. And on that note, there is no recycle bin. So if you delete a task, you can't restore it back again. There's no recycle bin for your tasks. There's also no audit trail, so you can't see who's made changes to tasks. There's no version history, so you can't roll back to a previous version. And there's no time capture. So that's the biggest one for us. We work in a time business, so we sell time. That's how our business works. And therefore, we can't capture time against the tasks. So to be honest, we actually don't use these tools because we have to capture time in a different management system. So yeah, that was a big one for us, the time capture. There's also no blueprints or templates to create blueprints of tasks that you can actually create a plan full of blueprints of tasks and things like that. There's the repeating task is a bit weird. Give it a go yourself, but it recurs every time you close the task, the next week it will recur. But if you have the task open, it doesn't recur, which is a little bit strange. So we actually have built automation systems to create templated tasks for people and to create them as recurring tasks. So like, I want to be able to see that if I haven't closed a task for 3 weeks, I actually have three outstanding tasks, not one, which is how it currently works. There's no project dependencies, which is where one task is dependent on the close of another task, and there's no Gantt and timeline. If you don't know what Gantt and timeline is, then you don't need to know. But if you are in project management, they don't have them. And there's the integration, automation, and customization is pretty limited within the apps, but we can build solutions in a Power Platform to help with some of those aspects. So that's the limitations. I don't want to be negative on it, but those are the things that we've come across and found. For most businesses, for internal task management, the tools work perfectly well. Okay, I just want to spend a couple of minutes introducing Planner Premium. Everything Microsoft does, you have the free apps that come inside of Office 365, but you also have the premium version that you could pay a little bit extra for, and we'll just run into what those functions are. So typically for project management, for basic project management, you need this timeline chart, and this is where you get task dependencies. So you can actually start saying, well, that task is dependent on the one above. So if you extend the date of that task, then the next one pushes out and then the whole project pushes out. So if you are in the project management space, then you could consider Planner Premium. It also gives me the ability to look at a per person's task list to see how they're progressing on the project. And the most important thing, every conversation we're going to have now for the next like forever is going to be how Copilot interacts. And Copilot in Planner Premium is quite a cool feature. So you can actually ask Copilot to create tasks for you. So if you wanted to create a social media marketing campaign, you could just say to Copilot, create me a social media marketing campaign, and it will create and generate all of the tasks that are commonly used within a social media campaign and content calendars and stuff like that. So it's really cool, but you do have to pay for those features. Right, just quickly, other options. So we talked about some of the limitations. We work around some of those limitations by building custom lists and custom apps through the Power Platform. So there's Microsoft Lists that you can take a look at. The only downside to Microsoft Lists, it is isolated. It's very isolated to that process or that list. So just be mindful of that one. Microsoft Loop, we're going to have the next webinar is on Loop. So that's a collaborative and digital workspace. It's like an MC whiteboard where you can put all of this content in, including tasks. So you can assign tasks inside a Loop. So now we have another thing that we have to worry about where people are putting tasks, but that's quite well integrated. So we'll talk about that one later. For people that are actually project managers in your organization, then there's other project management tools. Microsoft has Microsoft Projects. You could look at that, or you could look at alternative third-party apps. And like I often say to people is Microsoft make it really good to have like a collection of apps. So there's a whole suite of apps, but they're not designed specifically to run task management. It's just a task management add-on to what they already provide. So if you are really looking for a fully, you know, feature-rich task management system, then you might want to look at some of those other options. So you got Monday.com. These are just the big names. We actually use Rike, so that's the one that we use. It's pretty cool. But for those that don't need full rich task management, then what you've already got inside of Office 365 is pretty awesome. All right, so some recommendations to get started. So basically just have a play, start creating some of those task lists. Oh, well, that's on auto sliding. Anyway, recommendation, just have a play. If you hit some limitations and you want to look at some automation, then you can do that and reach out to us about some opportunities to automate. Our next session is Microsoft Loop, which is Wednesday, the 4th of September, 1:30 till 2 p.m. So Microsoft Loop is an amazing tool. It's got heaps of functionality in it, so that's going to be quite an exciting topic.
I think that pretty much covers everything that we were looking to do, and Loop is going to be a good topic to cover. So join us for that one.
Yeah, that was you running that one, isn't it? I think.
I believe so.
Nice.
No bias at all.
Okay, anyway, register. Also, follow us on LinkedIn. We'll share the recording within a couple of days. I usually have to trim it a little bit. So whenever I have some time to edit, including this bit, I'll probably trim this bit out. But yeah, thanks very much for attending. We'll get the recording out, and in a couple of weeks, we'll share it through social media as well. But yeah, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. See you later.
See ya.